Hello everybody, I'm back with a new video, a video that is long overdue. I've explained in another video why it's taken me so long to get this video out, so I'm not going to go into much detail here, but I lost all the footage in a freak accident on vacation. Just as a warning, I want to say that this video was not what I intended. I did a bunch of stop motion animation, a lot of cool cuts that I was really proud of. I lost most of that and the footage I made it from. So this is my best attempt at trying to piece it back together with little bits. So it was actually a huge mental hurdle that I had to get over just to try and piece this footage back together. It was hard to force myself to do all this stuff again when I was so happy with what I'd done before. But if I did it once, I can do it again. And normally I have the attitude that the next time I do it, it'll be better. But it was really hard to get that attitude when you're missing a lot of the footage. So I've tried to cobble together the remaining footage. And in today's video, we're going to look at how to make the Master Sword from the Breath of the Wild. Let's get started. First off, I'm going to take one of the Master Sword blanks that I made in another video, and I'm going to blast it with a little bit of primer so that paint sticks to it better. When you're spray painting, you want to go in nice even passes, not too close and not too far to the object you're painting. One of the great things about painting something with primer is that it points out your flaws. Normally, this would show me all of the things that I need to fix on the sword. But as it stands, I'm going to be making this a very worn and battered sword, so I won't be doing that, but I will show you how. First, we're going to take a little bit of JB Weld and mix part A and B together. Originally, I didn't have this part in the video, but since I lost so much footage in the river, I decided to incorporate it to make the video a little more substantial. Now, you mix the black and white to make gray, then it's ready to apply. I'm using a squeegee so that the filler gets in all of the holes and low spaces and not on the high. Also, I'm a poet and don't know it. As you can see, I've filled all the holes, erring on the side of overfilling because all of the excess can be sanded off later. We're going to be using wet and dry sandpaper because I think that method works the best. And we're just going to give it a good once over until everything's smooth. Another trick that will help us out is using a block, and we can wrap our sandpaper around it, and this will help us to get nice faceted edges. Again, I didn't really do this on the sword I actually used in this video because the sword in Breath of the Wild is very battered and all of these flaws are just free weathering. After that, I put a base layer of paint on the rest of the sword. On the images that I had, I painted the metal on first, but I just want to say you actually want to do the opposite. When you spray paint over metallic paint, that paint tends to shift and it causes the paint layer on top to crack. And it's very unsightly. So unless you're trying to get a crackled effect, I recommend painting the handle of the sword blue with the regular spray paint and then going over the top of that with your metal finish. Thanks to how incompetent I am, I'm going to have to recreate the next step here for you in a lovely professional drawing. So let's pretend like this is our Master Sword. Ah, there we go. A very lifelike representation. When I actually made this replica, I had the actual Master Sword casting here, and I was drawing on it instead of on this masterful rendition. And I actually cut with my Dremel tool, cutting along the lines I drew and carving out the material inside the cracks to try and make all of the slices and nicks that were in the Breath of the Wild sword. And these are the outcomes. One side I tried to really copy what was on the cover of Breath of the Wild, and the other one I had a little more artistic license. After I cut all the notches out of the sword, then I went back over it with wet dry sandpaper, scuffed it up, and made it look more worn and tarnished. I also took an X-Acto knife and made some of the other nicks in the blade. Though this is footage from another video because I lost this footage in the river. In this game, the Master Sword receives some damage here below the crossguard. When I went to cut that out, I created a hole because it was a slush casting and the casting is hollow. So I tried to use some tin foil to patch the hole, which you can sometimes do, but this turned out to be far too deep. So what I ended up doing was going with some expanding foam. I forgot to put on a glove. Always remember to wear gloves when using this stuff. Now I've given it a little squirt. It's time to wait for it to dry. The next day it was fully dry and I was able to pick off all the excess stuff and all the ugly stuff. And though I lost the footage and I can't quite remember, I believe I took some sculpture epoxy and mixed it together and went over the top of the foam and then pressed in textures. If I didn't, I should have. Using the reference photo on my tablet and some acrylic paint, I'm going to add rust to the Master Sword. Or at least I hope it's rust. For my first layer, I'm going to use burnt sienna and I believe yellow ochre, though raw sienna will probably do just as well. And as you can see, I'm just kind of dabbing it and globbing it on. We don't want it to go on smooth, we kind of want it to glob and clump on, so that we get a little bit of that rust texture right off the bat. For the most part, I'm just going around trying to hit all the places that looked like they had rust on the actual game. Now, can magical swords rust? Especially magical swords that can heal themselves? I don't know. Don't think too hard about it. As you can see, I'm trying to be a little sporadic. I'm also letting the flaws in the brush add to the rust pattern. With a little practice, you can let the brush do most of the work. The main trick is to not get too contrived. Don't try too hard to control how the rust looks. I'm trying to make sure that I get in all the nicks and cracks. Also, I'm trying to hit raised edges, all those places where paint would especially get knocked off, just to add some believability to this. If you mess up, just clumsily use your finger to wipe off the excess like I do. And that finishes up our first pass. With our second layer, we're going to go with something a little bit darker, like a burnt umber. We just want to hit all of the spots where we've already put rust, and we want to make sure that our previous layers shine through. We're definitely not covering up all of our first layer. We want to see both layers. Again, I'm just trying to dab it on impasto. We want this to be lumpy and bumpy because that lends credibility to our rust. Now we're going to give it a little more texture. I'm using a leftover foam powder from some blocks that some of my sculpture students were using, but you could use all kinds of things to make this kind of crunchy, crusty texture. And I'm just mixing that directly into the acrylic paint. One more layer will add texture, of course, but it will also add unity and variety. The color is similar enough to the first two layers that it will help blend them together and unify them and bring everything a little bit more cohesion. But it's also different enough to add a little bit of variety and make this piece a little more complex, a little more interesting to look at, and give our viewers' brains a little more something to chew on. It's starting to look pretty good, if I do say so myself, but I think we need one more thing to add that really nice finishing touch. And this is one of the areas where I lost some footage. So I wanted to show you guys how to make some pigment powders. Before I used a bunch of pastels that were rust colored, but seeing as how I smashed those with a hammer and lost the footage in a river, I'm just going to have to recreate the footage with this piece of charcoal.
Get in there, little buddy. It's gonna be safe, I promise.
I just put it in the zip top bag so that when I hit it with the hammer, the pieces don't fly everywhere. That keeps everything collected for me. You might want to use a freezer bag or something a little thicker than what I did. You can see the damage that the bag took. I like to save baby food jars so I can put things like these pigment powders in them. So these are my 3 pigment powders that I'm going to be using. This is going to give our rust that powdery, rusty look. So I'm just going to apply this stuff pretty heavy in passes, each in turn, for all 3 colors.
Very dusty.
So I'm just caking it on and then brushing off the excess because I want the powder to get in all of the crevices. There's nothing quite like powder in the crevices. That's what my grandma used to say. I'm just kidding, my grandma never said that. May God rest her soul. I'm just powdering this doll up, putting all the powder on it. Just spanking that powder on there, smacking it on there, brushing it all around. You know, just being creative. Alright, and this is what it looks like. Very nice, very realistic. I couldn't be happier with the way it turned out. Now it's time to give the handle a little love. We're going to be using some leather that is that Hyrule teal color. It should give this handle a nice authentic touch and just add a layer of believability. It'll just be a really nice detail. I cut it into strips with my X-Acto knife and my ruler. Yeah, my knife might be a little dull here. And now I'm getting rid of these zip ties that I used to hang the sword up while I painted it. And then we just want to take a piece of sandpaper and give this a tooth where we're going to be gluing it down. We want the glue to have something to stick to on this plastic. I was very surprised with how well the leather actually glued. It actually dried surprisingly fast with no activator. I guess it's the same way if you ever noticed you're trying to glue something with super glue and it never dries. You sit there and hold it until you basically shrivel up and die and turn into dust and it's still not dry.
What day is it?
But if you ever get super glue on your fingers, it dries instantly. I mean, you are automatically forever glued to yourself, and then you can't use your fingerprint sensor on your phone for like a week. I guess the leather is made out of skin, so it was like a dream come true just gluing this stuff down. It worked so nice. I barely had to wait at all, and it just made this such a pleasure. As you can see, I'm just following the patterns that were already laid out for me on the Mastersword. Now it's time for a nice dark wash. I would recommend that you use some kind of acrylic paint. I used oil paint because I really just wanted that authentic grimy look. But I can tell you that I think I should have went with the acrylic because it took forever for this oil to dry. And it took me a long time before I was able to play around with this sword without getting dark wash oil paint on my hands. And it stayed tacky feeling for a long time as well. Now I'm just using that same dark wash to kind of fake runs and grime in all these little recesses in the sword. I'm also trying to make it look like as it got rained on, that grime has kind of dripped out of these little recesses where it collected. Kind of to add a little bit of believability to it. It might also look like rust dripping, so that's another positive. And that just about wraps this project up. Well, that wraps up another video. I'm really happy with the way that the sword turned out. I'm not exactly as happy with the way the video turned out due to the reasons I've already stated, but I'll leave you with the glamour shots. Until next time.